June 14, 1944, 05:47 hours, Peleliu Island Airstrip. The pre-dawn air smells like aviation fuel and coral dust. Master Sergeant Raymond Kowalski kneels beside the left propeller blade of F4U-1D Corsair Bureau Number 57590, callsign Devil Dog 3. His hands shake, not from fear, from knowing what he's about to do violates every regulation in the Navy Bureau of Aeronautics technical manual. The propeller blade is a Hamilton standard 3-blade constant speed unit, diameter 13 feet 4 inches. Each blade weighs 47 pounds of forged aluminum alloy. The specifications are absolute. The tolerances are measured in thousandths of an inch. Ray is about to bend one of those blades, with a hydraulic jack, on purpose. Lieutenant Commander James Hawk Morrison will fly this aircraft in 3 hours against Japanese Zeros over Yap Island. Those Zeros are faster than the Corsair in level flight, barely, but enough. Enough that 3 Corsair pilots have died in the last week because they couldn't catch Japanese fighters breaking for clouds. Ray positions the jack against the blade tip, 12 inches from the end. The aluminum is cold under his calloused fingers. If he does this wrong, the blade will shatter. Morrison will die when the propeller disintegrates at 2400 RPM. If he does it right, if the theory he's worked out in his maintenance log is correct, Morrison will gain 40 miles per hour, maybe more. He doesn't know which is worse, killing a pilot through incompetence or watching pilots die because he was too afraid to try something that might save them. Ray pumps the jack. The blade bends. 3 degrees, 4 degrees, 5. He stops at 6 degrees of additional pitch angle, what the manuals call catastrophic structural deformation, what Ray calls giving our boys a fighting chance. Raymond Kowalski was born March 3, 1919 in Hamtramck, Michigan, a Polish enclave inside Detroit where the auto plants ran 3 shifts and every third house had a son working the line at Dodge, Maine. His father assembled engines, his mother packed pierogi for church socials and kept a photograph of the Black Madonna above the kitchen sink. Ray never finished high school, dropped out in 1936 when his father's back gave out and someone needed to bring home a paycheck. He was 17, good with his hands, better with tools. Got hired at Packard Motor Car Company, started in the machine shop. Within 2 years, he was troubleshooting engine problems that engineers couldn't solve, not because he understood the mathematics, but because he could feel when something was wrong, a vibration, a sound, the way metal responded under stress. When Pearl Harbor happened, Ray enlisted in the Navy, not out of patriotism, though he'd never admit that to his mother, but because the Navy worked on aircraft engines, and aircraft engines were more interesting than car engines. They operated at higher RPM, higher temperatures, under conditions that would destroy an automobile power plant in minutes. He arrived at Aviation Machinist Mate School in Norman, Oklahoma in March 1942. The instructors taught from manuals. Ray learned from the engines themselves. By the time he graduated, he'd memorized every specification for the Pratt & Whitney R2800 Double Wasp, the engine that powered the F4U Corsair. 2,000 horsepower, 18 cylinders in 2 rows, weight 2,360 pounds, operating temperature 425 degrees Fahrenheit at the cylinder heads. But specifications are theoretical, combat is real. And in combat, Ray learned, the manuals are often wrong. He shipped out to the Pacific in November 1943, assigned to VMF 214, the Black Sheep Squadron, as a crew chief. His aircraft, Bureau Number 57590, flown by various pilots, each with their own quirks and complaints. Ray met 2 Marines who'd define his war, Corporal Thomas Chen, an engine mechanic from San Francisco who could diagnose a misfire by sound alone, and Sergeant Michael Sullivan from Boston, who kept a rosary wrapped around his tool belt and crossed himself before every takeoff. "You think God cares about airplanes?" Ray asked him once. "I think God cares about the men flying them," Sully replied. Ray wasn't sure he believed in God, but he believed in keeping pilots alive. April 23, 1944, Ray's worst day. Ensign Bobby Halford took off in Corsair Bureau Number 50340, one of Ray's aircraft, for a patrol over Truck Lagoon. Standard mission. Halford was 21, from Iowa, engaged to a girl named Sarah who sent him letters that smelled like perfume. He kept a photograph of her tucked inside his flight helmet. Halford never came back. The squadron intelligence officer pieced it together from radio intercepts and patrol reports. Halford had engaged 2 Zeros at 15,000 feet, shot one down, pursued the second. The Zero dove for the deck, then pulled up and ran. Halford gave chase but couldn't close the distance. The Zero had maybe a 5-mile-per-hour advantage in level flight at low altitude. That was enough. The Zero escaped into cloud cover. 10 minutes later, 6 more Zeros bounced Halford. Alone. Outnumbered. He fought until his ammunition ran out, then tried to run. But a Corsair that can't catch a Zero also can't escape one. They shot him down over open ocean. Nobody saw a parachute. Ray found the photograph of Sarah in the ready room. Halford had left it behind that morning. Ray stared at it for 20 minutes. Then he went to his maintenance tent and wrote in his log. Halford died because the F4U-1D can't match a Zero's top speed at sea level. The manual says we're faster. The manual's wrong. Or the Zero is faster than intelligence thinks. Doesn't matter. Dead is dead. There has to be a way to give them more speed. That night, Ray couldn't sleep. He kept seeing Halford's face, kept thinking about Sarah in Iowa, opening a telegram that would destroy her life. Tommy Chen found him at 0300 hours, sitting outside the maintenance tent, staring at a propeller blade. "You okay, Wrench?" Ray didn't answer immediately. Then, what if we're setting the propeller pitch wrong? The pitch is set per spec. I know, but what if the spec is wrong? Tommy sat down beside him. You want to modify a propeller, Wrench? That's court-martial territory, you know that. I know, but if it works? If it works, you save lives. If it doesn't, you kill someone. Tommy paused. That's a hell of a gamble. Ray looked at him. How many pilots we lost this month? 7. How many because they couldn't catch or outrun Zeros? Tommy didn't answer. They both knew it was 4. Then it's not a gamble, Ray said quietly. It's mathematics. Over the next 6 weeks, Ray studied propeller theory, wrote equations in his maintenance log, calculated blade pitch angles, thrust coefficients, advance ratios. He didn't have an engineering degree. He had high school algebra and a machinist's intuition. But the math worked. Increasing the pitch angle by 6 degrees should increase thrust at high speed, reducing drag and increasing top speed by approximately 35 to 45 miles per hour. The cost? Slightly reduced acceleration and climb rate. And the risk that the blade would fail structurally, disintegrating and killing the pilot. Ray wrote in his log June 13, 1944, "Tomorrow, I'm going to do something that will either get me court-martialed or save lives. I don't know which. I'm terrified, but I keep thinking about Halford, about Sarah, about all the pilots who died because we couldn't give them the speed they needed. If I'm wrong, I'll face the consequences. But if I don't try, more pilots will die, and I'll have to live with knowing I could have done something." June 14, 1944, 0600 hours. The propeller blade is bent, 6 degrees of additional pitch. Ray's hands still tremble as he releases the hydraulic jack. Tommy Chen watches from 10 feet away. It's done? It's done. And if it fails? Then Morrison dies and I spend the rest of my life in Leavenworth. Ray wipes sweat from his forehead despite the cool morning air. If it works, we modify every Corsair in the squadron. Sully Sullivan crosses himself. I'll be praying. Appreciate it. At 7:30 a.m., Lieutenant Commander Morrison arrives for pre-flight inspection. He walks around the Corsair, checking control surfaces, looking for leaks. He pauses at the propeller, runs his hand along the blade, looks at Ray. This blade look right to you, Wrench? Ray's heart hammers. Yes, sir. Inspected it this morning, all within tolerances. It's a lie. The blade is 6 degrees outside tolerances. If Morrison looks closely, really looks, he'll see the modification. But pilots trust their crew chiefs. Morrison nods and climbs into the cockpit. 10-15 hours, Morrison's flight of 4 Corsairs takes off for a fighter sweep over Yap Island. Ray watches from the flight line. Tommy stands beside him. You think it'll hold? I don't know. They wait. Minutes stretch into hours. Ray can't work, can't eat, just stands near the radio shack, listening to scratchy transmissions. At 11:47, the squadron frequency crackles to life. Morrison's voice. Tally-ho! 4 Zeros, Angels 12, heading 270. Then silence. Static. Ray's stomach twists. More transmissions. Fragmented. On your 6. Break right. Got one. Then, clear as crystal. Morrison's voice, excited. Holy hell! I'm catching him! Wrench was right about the... The transmission cuts off. Tommy grabs Ray's arm. What did he mean? I don't know. At 13:23 hours, 4 Corsairs return. All 4. No losses. They land in sequence. Morrison taxis to Ray's parking spot, shuts down the engine, climbs out, walks straight to Ray. "What did you do to my propeller?" Ray's mouth dries. Because whatever you did, it works. I caught a zero in level flight at 300 feet. Caught him. I've never been able to do that before. Shot him down from his 6 o'clock. Clean kill. Morrison grins. So I'm asking again, what did you do to my propeller? Ray exhales. Increased the blade pitch by 6 degrees, sir. It's not in the manual. Morrison stares at him. You modified a propeller without authorization? Yes, sir. That's illegal. Yes, sir. Morrison looks at the propeller, looks back at Ray. Can you do it to the rest of the squadron's birds? Sir, if the brass finds out, screw the brass. Can you do it or not? Yes, sir, I can do it. Morrison claps him on the shoulder. Then get to work, Wrench. That's an order. The modification worked. Over the next 3 weeks, Ray and his team modified every Corsair in VMF 214, 42 aircraft, each one bent 6 degrees beyond specification, each one illegal, each one giving pilots a 40-mile-per-hour advantage they'd never had before. Corsair pilots stopped losing fights to zeros, started winning them. The modifications spread, quietly, unofficially, to other squadrons. Crew chiefs whispered about it. The Kowalski mod, the Hamtramck bend. Nobody put it in official reports, but the Navy brass wasn't stupid. August 7, 1944, a Bureau of Aeronautics inspector arrived at Peleliu to investigate reports of unauthorized modifications to airframe components. Lieutenant Commander Arthur Hammond, a by-the-book engineer who'd never heard a shot fired in anger. He inspected Morrison's Corsair, measured the propeller pitch. His face went white. This propeller has been structurally compromised. This aircraft is grounded immediately. He turned to Ray. Who authorized this modification? I did, sir, on my own authority. You have no authority. You're a crew chief, not an engineer. Hammond's voice shook with fury. Do you understand what you've done? These propellers could fail catastrophically. You've endangered every pilot in this squadron. Morrison stepped forward. Sir, with respect, these modifications have saved lives. Our loss rate has dropped by I don't care about your loss rate, Commander. I care about following regulations. Sergeant Kowalski will be placed under arrest pending court-martial for destruction of government property and endangering military personnel. Ray was taken into custody. Spent 3 days in the brig while the brass decided his fate. What Ray didn't know, Morrison and 11 other pilots submitted written statements attesting that the modifications saved their lives. Tommy Chen and Sully Sullivan testified that Ray acted out of concern for pilot safety, not negligence. The squadron commander, Lieutenant Colonel Gregory Pappy Boyington, himself a rule breaker of legendary proportions, wrote a personal letter to the Secretary of the Navy. August 10, 1944. The charges were dropped. Ray was released with a formal reprimand in his service record and an unofficial commendation from Pappy Boyington for innovative maintenance practices in combat conditions. But the cost was real. September 3, 1944. Ray was modifying another Corsair's propeller when the hydraulic jack slipped. The blade snapped. The jagged aluminum edge caught Ray across the left hand, severing 3 fingers. Corpsmen rushed him to the field hospital. Morphine blurred the pain, but Ray stayed conscious long enough to hear the surgeon. We can't reattach them. I'm sorry. Ray looked at his mangled hand, the hand that had built engines, bent propellers, kept pilots alive. 3 fingers gone, just stumps remaining. Tommy Chen sat beside his hospital bed that night. I'm sorry, Wrench. Ray stared at the ceiling. I can't work like this, not as a crew chief. You'll find something else. Yeah. Ray's voice was hollow. Something else. He was evacuated stateside in October 1944, honorably discharged in December, with a Purple Heart he never requested and a disability pension he didn't want. The war ended. Ray went home to Hamtramck, got a job at the Dodge main plant, not on the line, but in quality control. He could still read blueprints, still catch problems others missed,
but he couldn't work with his hands the way he used to. Ray Kowalski died February 17, 1989, age 69, in a VA hospital in Detroit. Heart failure. His funeral was small. His wife Helen, his 2 daughters, a handful of neighbors. No military honors, no flag-draped coffin. Ray had specifically requested no military ceremony. "I was just a mechanic, nothing special," he'd told Helen. But 3 men in their 60s showed up uninvited. They wore Marine Corps League caps and medals on their sport coats. They stood in the back of the funeral home, silent. After the service, they approached Helen. The tallest one, silver hair, firm handshake, introduced himself. "James Morrison. I flew Corsairs in VMF 214. Your husband was my crew chief." Helen nodded. "He talked about you. Not often, but sometimes." Morrison gestured to the other 2 men. "Thomas Chen, Michael Sullivan. We all served with Ray." "He kept you in his prayers," Helen said. "All the pilots, even after he came home." Morrison's voice cracked slightly. "Mrs. Kowalski, I need you to know something. Ray saved my life, saved all our lives. That modification he made, it wasn't in any manual. It was illegal, but it worked. And I'm standing here 69 years old with grandchildren because your husband had the guts to break the rules when the rules were wrong." He pulled an envelope from his jacket. "This is from the squadron, all of us who are left. We wanted Ray to have it years ago, but he refused, said he didn't deserve recognition. But he did. He deserved more than we could ever give." Inside the envelope, a photograph. VMF 214 Squadron, 1944, standing in front of a Corsair. In the back row, barely visible, Ray Kowalski, holding a wrench, not smiling. On the back, 43 signatures, every pilot from the squadron, and a message in Morrison's handwriting. "To wrench Kowalski, who gave us wings that could catch the wind. We came home because you weren't afraid to be wrong. We lived because you were willing to risk everything." "Thank you." Helen wept. Morrison held her hand. "She never told me," Helen said. "He never said he saved anyone." "He wouldn't." That's who Ray was. They buried Ray in a small cemetery in Hamtramck. Simple headstone. Name, dates, beloved husband and father. No mention of the military, no mention of the war. But every year on his birthday, a group of elderly men, fewer each year, gather at that grave. They bring a wrench, place it on the headstone, stand in silence for a moment.
They investigated, found the modified propellers, measured them, ran wind tunnel tests, published a classified report in 1947, unauthorized field modifications to F4U propeller pitch and their effect on combat performance. Conclusion? The modifications, while violating Bureau of Aeronautics specifications, resulted in a 12% increase in maximum speed at sea level and a corresponding increase in combat effectiveness. Recommend further study for potential integration into future aircraft design protocols. The modifications Ray made with a hydraulic jack and a machinist's intuition eventually influenced post-war propeller design. Not directly, not with credit, but the principles he discovered, through trial, error, and desperation, found their way into engineering textbooks. Nobody remembers his name in those textbooks, just the data, the performance curves, the thrust coefficients. But the men who flew those Corsairs remember. Lieutenant Colonel James Morrison retired, gave a speech at a Marine Corps Aviation Association dinner in 1987. We talk about the heroes of the air war, the aces, the medal winners. But the real heroes were the crew chiefs, the mechanics, the men who kept us flying when everything said we should quit. I'm alive because a man named Ray Kowalski looked at a manual that said, "Don't touch this," and decided to touch it anyway. That's courage. That's innovation. That's why we won. After Morrison's speech, 3 people in the audience asked, who was Ray Kowalski? Morrison didn't have a good answer. Ray had refused interviews, declined reunions, never wrote a memoir. He went home, worked at Dodge, Maine for 30 years, raised his family, and died without fanfare. His daughter Rebecca found his maintenance log in his belongings after he died. Hundreds of pages, calculations, sketches, notes about pilots, aircraft, problems solved, and one entry dated June 13, 1944. I don't know if what I'm about to do is right. I just know I can't watch another pilot die because we're giving them inadequate tools. If I'm wrong, I'll pay the price. But if I'm right, maybe somebody's son comes home to his mother. Maybe somebody's husband gets to meet his daughter. That's worth the risk. That's worth everything. Rebecca donated the log to the National Museum of Naval Aviation in Pensacola. It sits in the archives, rarely displayed. But researchers sometimes request it. Engineers, historians, people trying to understand how ordinary men solved impossible problems with limited resources and unlimited determination. Ray's name appears on no memorials, no plaques, no halls of fame. But every Corsair pilot who survived a dogfight because their aircraft was faster than the enemy's manual said it should be, they carried Ray home with them. In their memories, in their gratitude, in the quiet knowledge that someone they never thanked gave them the edge that kept them alive. I keep thinking about Ray Kowalski, about a man with 3 fingers gone and a purple heart he never wore, about a mechanic who looked at a propeller and saw not a finished product, but a problem that needed solving. What makes someone do that? Take the risk, break the rules, face court-martial and disgrace because the alternative, doing nothing, is worse. It's not courage, not the way we usually think of it. Ray wasn't brave, he was terrified. His log entries make that clear. He knew what he was risking: career, freedom, the pilot's life if the modification failed. But he did it anyway, not for glory, not for medals, but because pilots were dying and he had an idea that might save them. That's the lesson. Not that we should break rules recklessly, but that we should ask, are the rules serving the mission, or is the mission serving the rules? Ray's words from his log: I can't watch another pilot die because we're giving them inadequate tools. How many of us walk past inadequate tools every day? How many times do we see a problem, a real problem, hurting real people, and think, that's not my job, that's not my place, someone else will fix it? Ray could have thought that, should have thought that. He was a crew chief, not an engineer. He had no authority, no credentials, no right to modify aircraft components. But he did it anyway, because authority and credentials don't fix problems. People fix problems. Ordinary people who care more about solving the issue than protecting themselves. You're facing something right now. A problem. A challenge. Something broken that you know how to fix, but you're not sure you're allowed to. You're not sure you're qualified. You're not sure what will happen if you try. Ray wasn't sure either, but he took out his hydraulic jack and bent the propeller anyway. 43 pilots came home because he did. How many people will come home, literally or metaphorically, if you do what you're thinking about doing, what you're afraid to do? Ray wrote one more thing in his log, the last entry before his injury. The worst mistake isn't doing something wrong. It's doing nothing when you know something is wrong. Take the shot. Bend the propeller. Break the rule that's breaking people. Someone's counting on you, even if they don't know it yet, even if you never meet them. Even if nobody ever thank you. Do it anyway.